As we conclude our course on the Second World War and Ukraine's role in it, it's crucial to focus on several key points. We titled this lecture series, The Unfinished Second World War, for good reason. While the Second World War officially began on September 1st, 1939, and ended on September 2nd, 1945, Ukraine's experience followed a different timeline. Parts of Ukrainian territory, Carpathian Ukraine, fell under Hungarian occupation in the spring of 1939. This followed the dissolution of Czechoslovakia, which had governed the region since the First World War. For Carpathian Ukraine, the war began earlier than the official start date. The 1945 victory over the Nazi bloc and the cessation of fighting in Europe did not mark the end of combat, terror, and brutal violence in Ukraine. Martial law in Western Ukraine remained in effect until 1946. The forced resettlement of Poles and Ukrainians continued for several years afterwards. Many lost their homes, their families, freedoms, citizenship, and sometimes their lives. The war persisted for the OUN and UPA fighters who rejected Soviet rule and maintained armed resistance against the USSR into the early 1950s. It didn't end for hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians deported to Siberia and Central Asia, nor for those imprisoned in Gulag camps. Some returned home only after the Soviet Union's collapse. Russia's aggression against Ukraine, which began in 2014, revealed that many issues of the Second World War remain unresolved. When Putin announced the so-called Special Military Operation on February 24, 2022, he called for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, equating the Ukrainian state with the Nazi regime to justify the aggression. Russians continue to exploit symbols of the Great Patriotic War, which form the foundation of Russian imperial mythology, to legitimize their aggression. Russia actively manipulates the USSR's role in the anti-Hitler coalition. For Western countries, the memory of the Second World War symbolizes victory over Nazism and the Holocaust. This memory forms the basis for tolerance and compromise policies. The West views the Soviet Union not just as a military ally, but as a liberator from Nazism, fighting good against evil. The Nuremberg trials convicted only German criminals, effectively whitewashing Soviet perpetrators despite their responsibility for enormous tragedies. The USSR, like Germany, committed extensive crimes and shared culpability for starting the Second World War. The myth of the Soviet Union as a victim of Hitler's treacherous attack and Soviet liberators from Nazism continues to foster Western sympathy towards modern Russia. The 2008 Prague Declaration on European Conscience and Communism called for the recognition of Nazi and communist regimes as the 20th century's greatest tragedies. It demanded equal treatment of the victims of both totalitarian systems. In 2019, the European Parliament passed a resolution on the importance of European remembrance for the future of Europe. The resolution states that the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact triggered the Second World War, with two totalitarian regimes dividing Europe into spheres of influence. However, European society received these initiatives ambivalently. Western intellectual tradition, with its leftist ideas, never experienced communism directly. Western European social democracy was built on democracy, social justice, and human rights. In the former Russian Empire, social democracy devolved into totalitarian communism, marked by repression and mass crimes. This is a fundamental difference, often overlooked by the West. Ukrainians fought for statehood, but achieved it neither after the First World War nor the Second. Ukrainian territory became the epicenter of the 20th century's major global conflicts, from which both Russia and Germany drew their resources. The decisive moment came on December 1st, 1991, when over 90% of citizens voted for Ukrainian independence in a nationwide referendum. The Union Treaty was denounced within a week, and the USSR ceased to exist. Ukraine's independence marks the final chord of the evil empire. However, wars in Georgia and Chechnya and Russia's full-scale aggression against Ukraine demonstrate that the empire merely changed form while maintaining its predatory essence. Russia continues imposing its will on countries it considers within its geopolitical sphere of influence. Ukraine remains the key country that is restraining these ambitions.